The forgotten voices of a forgotten battle. Long after the guns fell silent and the fleets withdrew into the shrouds of history, the Battle of Jutland lived on. Not in official reports, not in Admiralty memos, not in triumphal speeches or political debates, but in the memories of the men who were there, in the letters they wrote home, in the diaries they hid in lockers, in the trembling signatures on survivor reports, in the quiet moments decades later when the past forced itself back into their lives. Some of these men never told their families what they had witnessed. Some spoke only near the end. Some wrote their truths down, sealed them away, and let time decide whether the world should ever read them. In Part 9, we dive into these human stories, the voices of sailors, officers, stokers, signalmen, and engineers. The men who lived through the inferno. The men who carried Jutland not as a battle, but as a lifetime. These are not legends. These are not myths. These are real people, real memories, real pain, and real courage. The young signalman on HMS Lion. 19-year-old Walter Chambers had never seen war before Jutland. He wrote home just a week before the battle. "We keep busy. There is talk we will meet the Boche soon. If so, Mother, know that I am ready for whatever comes." On May 31st, at exactly 3:48 p.m., Walter stood beside the aft signaling platform as Lion opened fire. He later recalled, "When Lion fired her first broadside, the whole ship seemed to jump. Dust fell from the rafters. The air shook. I could feel the blast in my bones." Minutes later, Lion's Q turret was struck, causing a flash fire that nearly reached the magazine. Walter watched the turret erupt. Men inside were burned alive. Major Francis Harvey gave the order to flood the magazines. Although he was already dying, Walter saw Harvey carried past him. His uniform was blackened. His skin was burning off. Yet he looked calm, as if he were already elsewhere. "He saved us. I owe him my life." Walter lived to be 82 years old. Every year on May 31st, he would wake before dawn and stand quietly by his window. His family never knew why. The gunnery officer who watched Queen Mary explode, Lieutenant Geoffrey Lockwood, served aboard HMS Princess Royal. He was trained to remain composed in battle, calculating angles, adjusting for range, shouting firing solutions over the roar of guns. Nothing prepared him for what he saw next. At 4:26 p.m., Queen Mary, only 2 cables away, took a direct hit from Derflinger. Lockwood wrote, "She seemed to rise from the sea in a pillar of flame. Then her bow was gone. Then the center of the ship erupted like a volcano. Then nothing, only smoke and falling pieces. A piece of steel plating, part of Queen Mary, landed on Princess Royal's deck moments later." Lockwood never forgot the sound. There was no scream, no cry, just one enormous crash, as if the world cracked in two. He spent the rest of his life dreaming about that moment. The last survivor of HMS Indefatigable. HMS Indefatigable was the first British battlecruiser lost at Jutland. Only 2 men survived. One was able seaman Ernest Briggs. Decades later, in an interview recorded on crackling audio tape, Briggs described the moment the ship took her fatal hits. There was a flash below, then the deck buckled like cardboard. I felt the ship break under my feet. Thrown into the air by the explosion, Briggs hit the water and was pulled under by suction as the ship sank. He said, "I thought I was dead. Then I saw daylight. I swam without knowing how." He watched the ship go down. I saw her stern lift. Men were still on it. They were waving. Then she went under. Of the more than 1,000 men aboard, only Briggs and 1 other were rescued. For years afterward, he refused to attend memorial services. When asked why, he answered quietly, "Because I lived and they didn't." Inside HMS Malaya, the engine room in hell, HMS Malaya took more direct hits than almost any British ship at Jutland. Below deck, the engine rooms became infernos of steam, fire, and choking smoke. A stoker named James Laird later described the experience. "We fought blind. The heat was like standing inside a furnace. When shells hit above us, dust fell like rain. We were soaked in sweat, steam burned our skin. We kept the engines running because if we didn't, the whole ship was lost. At one point, A shell pierced the armor above and ruptured a steam pipe. Laird remembered. The scream of the steam was worse than any shell. A man stood in the wrong place, and the steam flayed him alive. They wrapped bandages around their mouths. They crawled. They worked by touch. I don't remember fear, Laird said. Only the thought, if we stop, everyone dies. Because the engineers held the line below deck, Malaya stayed afloat. Hundreds survived because of men whose names never made newspapers. SMS Derflinger, the crew who refused to break. German sailors aboard Derflinger faced a nightmare of their own. The ship took over 20 direct hits, some large enough to tear turret faces apart. A German petty officer named Heinrich Buckler wrote in his diary, "The ship shook with each impact. Plates cracked. Flames reached the ammunition room. We pumped water with our bare hands. Men were carried past us without arms, without faces. But we stayed at our posts. Engineers kept boilers running despite flooding. Gunners continued firing long after ammunition crews were wiped out. When the order came to withdraw, Buckler looked around the devastation and wrote, 'We did not win, but we did not break. That is enough.' The mystery of HMS Black Prince until the wreck spoke. Black Prince vanished during the night action. No survivors, no witnesses. But just before darkness swallowed her, a young lookout on Malaya reported, 'I saw a ship ahead lit up suddenly, then gone.' For years, no one knew what happened. When divers located the wreck in 2001, its condition revealed the truth. She had stumbled into the path of an entire German battleship division at point-blank range. Lieutenant Eric Stahl of SMS Friedrich der Grosse later described, "A ship appeared out of the dark, so close I could see men running on her deck. We fired at once. She vanished in a sheet of flame. No one aboard Black Prince had a chance. Her story lived only in the memories of the men who saw her die, and the silent testimony of steel on the seabed. A destroyer's tale, HMS Turbulent and the Night of Heroes. Destroyers fought the fiercest, closest battles at Jutland. HMS Turbulent found herself in the path of German dreadnoughts during the night. Her commander, Captain H.J.G. Ferrant, tried to turn away, but in the darkness and chaos, she was caught in the beams of German searchlights. German battleships opened fire simultaneously. Survivor accounts from other destroyers say, it was like watching a man walk into a furnace. Turbulent was hit repeatedly and capsized. Only 9 men out of 90 survived. One of them, Seaman Thomas Fair, spent hours in freezing water before being pulled aboard a German patrol boat. He later said, "The Germans treated us gently. One gave me his coat. We were enemies only minutes before. At sea, that no longer mattered." Fair spent the rest of the war as a POW. After the war, he wrote a poem that ended, "I hated no one after that night. The sea took everything else." The night the men of Wiesbaden called for help. The German cruiser Wiesbaden was immobilized early in the battle. All night, she drifted between the two fleets, unsighted but not unheard. British sailors reported hearing faint calls across the water. "Hallo, Hilfe, Kamerad, Hilfe." Crews on HMS Warrior and HMS Defense wrote of hearing voices in the dark calling, always calling. But no one could see where the voices came from. The sea was full of wreckage. Destroyers maneuvered by sound, not sight. It wasn't until 2016, 100 years later, when the wreck of Wiesbaden was surveyed in detail, that historians confirmed. The ship remained afloat until dawn. Almost the entire crew died of exposure, wounds, or drowning. None were rescued. The human tragedy of that drifting, dying ship haunted many British sailors for life. The doctor on HMS Warspite, Medicine in Hell. HMS Warspite suffered repeated hits, including a rudder malfunction that turned her into a circling target. Below deck, Surgeon Lieutenant Harold S. H. Arcello worked in the ship's makeshift surgery, a compartment filled with blood, smoke, oil, heat, screams. He later wrote, "We used everything, bandages, shirts, curtains, newspapers, anything that could stop blood." He performed amputations on the deck, under fire, with seawater as his antiseptic. His report records 72 surgeries in 4 hours, operating by lantern light, wounded men lying on coal dust, injections made with shaking hands. When a shell struck near the medical bay, he simply wrote, "We kept working." That night, Arcello collapsed from exhaustion. He never spoke publicly about Jutland again. The German engineer who flooded the magazines. On SMS Seydlitz, the ship nearly met the same fate as Queen Mary. A shell hit beneath the aft turret, igniting a flash fire that began racing toward the magazines. Chief Petty Officer Otto Zill was first on the scene. His actions saved the ship. While others fled the smoke and fire, Zill ran toward it and pulled the flooding valves manually, knowing it might drown him or cause steam burns. His report states, "I cannot see, I cannot breathe, but I heard the crackling of fire above the magazine. I knew what it meant. His hands were burned raw, but the water rushed in and extinguished the fire." Seydlitz survived. Zill later received the Iron Cross. He simply said, anyone else would have done the same. The ship that was too slow, HMS Warspite's accidental heroism. Warspite's jammed rudder forced her into a large circle, directly in front of the entire German line. This could have been suicide. Instead, it saved other British ships. German battleships focused their fire on the circling Warspite, thinking her steering was a deliberate feint. A sailor on HMS Valiant wrote, "Warspite drew their fire like a magnet. She saved us, and she still floated." It was one of the battle's great ironies. A mechanical failure became an act of heroism. The silence after the battle, men who never spoke again. Interviews with surviving sailors decades later reveal a chilling trend. Many never spoke of Jutland, not to friends, not to wives, not to children. One historian recorded, they carried Jutland inside them like a wound that never healed. Some had nightmares for years. Some flinched at the sound of thunder. Some avoided the sea entirely, even those who had loved it before. The battle left scars invisible to the world. Why these stories matter. Jutland is often remembered through ship names, tonnage sunk, tactical debates, strategic conclusions. But battles are not fought by ships. They're fought by people. People who made impossible decisions, faced unimaginable fear, showed extraordinary courage, suffered unimaginable loss. Without their stories, Jutland becomes a cold, mechanical event. With their stories, it becomes human, and only then do we truly understand what the battle meant. This part of the documentary is not about tactics, strategy, or naval engineering. It is about the men behind all of that. Men who were young, men who were brave, men who were terrified, men who never came home, men who came home changed forever. The truth is this: Jutland was not just a clash of fleets. It was a clash of lives. Every wreck on the seafloor is a tomb. Every survivor's letter is a fragment of humanity. Every ship's log is a testament to endurance. As we now move toward the final chapter of this documentary, its conclusion, we bring with us the voices of those who were there. Because without them, Jutland is only steel and statistics. With them, it becomes the story it truly is. A story of courage, a story of tragedy, a story of lessons hard-learned, a story humanity cannot afford to forget. The sea does not care who won. 100 years after the Battle of Jutland, on a calm morning in 2016, a Royal Navy patrol vessel drifted silently over the coordinates of the old battlefield. The water was flat, silver, almost tranquil. No fog, no thunder of guns, no pillars of flame, no screams. Just the North Sea, quiet, indifferent, eternal. A wreath was laid in the water. It floated briefly, then slowly turned and started to sink. As it slipped beneath the surface, the chaplain on deck whispered a truth older than any navy. The sea does not remember victory, only sacrifice. And that is where the story of the Battle of Jutland truly ends. Not with triumph, not with defeat, not with political arguments or naval theories, but with the human cost and a vast, transformative legacy that reshaped 20th century naval warfare. This is part 10, the final chapter. The part where we step back, look at the entire picture, and ask, what, in the end, did Jutland actually mean? The paradox of Jutland, the battle both sides claimed and feared. Immediately after the battle, Germany claimed victory. They sank more ships. They lost fewer men. Their sailors returned home to cheering crowds. Britain claimed strategic success. The blockade held. The high seas fleet retreated. Germany never challenged British naval supremacy again. But as the decades passed, historians began to understand something deeper. Jutland was not one battle. It was two battles fought simultaneously. The tactical battle, numbers sunk, shells fired, ships lost. The strategic battle, control of the sea, long-term war outcome. Germany won the first. Britain decisively won the second. But the consequences went much further. Jutland changed naval warfare as profoundly as Trafalgar, just in ways far less understood. The battle that ended an era. The world before Jutland believed in a lie. That giant battleships would always decide wars. Jutland shattered that myth. 1. Battleships were not invincible. They could explode in seconds. They could be blinded by weather. They could be crippled by one torpedo. 2. Communications mattered more than courage. Heroism could not save a ship from missed signals or flawed doctrine. 3. Speed without protection was suicide. The battlecruiser idea died at Jutland, even if some navies didn't realize it yet. 4. Gunnery was imperfect. Long-range accuracy was far less reliable than theorists claimed. 5. The future belonged to new technologies. Submarines, aircraft, radar, carriers, electronic warfare. Jutland was the last great gun duel in Europe, and the first battle that hinted at the wars to come. The 5 great lessons Jutland taught the world. Lesson 1. Firepower means nothing without protection. British battlecruisers were engineering marvels, fast, heavily armed, elegant. But they carried a fatal flaw. Their armor could not withstand modern shells. The catastrophic loss of Queen Mary, invincible and indefatigable, was not simply bad luck. It was the predictable result of thin turret armor, vulnerable magazines, unsafe cordite handling, flash doors wedged open, pressure to increase rate of fire. Jutland made one thing brutally clear. A warship that cannot survive being hit is not a warship, is a coffin. Navies around the world listened. Lesson 2. Communications decide battles. Again and again during Jutland, signals were lost in haze. Semaphore flags went unseen. Wireless messages were jammed or unclear. Orders arrived too late. Formations broke apart. Beatty famously believed his ships were not doing their duty. In reality, they never received his orders. From 1916 onward, navies began developing standardized signal protocols, dedicated signals officers, better wireless equipment, encrypted radio systems, centralized gunnery direction. By World War II, communication was the backbone of naval combat. It started at Jutland. Lesson 3. The best technology wins, but only if used correctly. Before Jutland, Britain believed it held overwhelming superiority. But the battle exposed painful realities. German shells were more effective. German flash protection was superior. German armor schemes were more resilient. German gunnery optics were better in haze. German damage control was world-class. British sailors were brave. British ships were powerful. But bravery and power could not compensate for flawed design and poor procedures. This forced a revolution in British naval engineering, one that saved thousands of lives in World War II. Lesson 4. Leadership under uncertainty is everything. Jellicoe faced one of the most complex tactical environments in naval history. Incomplete information, conflicting reports, low visibility, unknown enemy positions, thousands of lives on the line. If he made the wrong decision, Britain could lose the war in an afternoon. History has re-evaluated him. He was not overly cautious. He was correct. Modern analysis shows, had Jellicoe closed aggressively, he would have sailed into a torpedo trap and likely lost the Grand Fleet. He preserved British supremacy. He won the strategic battle. He saved the war effort. History took decades to appreciate this. Lesson 5. Strategy beats tactics. Germany outperformed Britain tactically. They sank more ships. Their engineering impressed the world. Their gunnery was exceptional, but did not matter. Why? Because Germany failed to change the strategic reality. The Royal Navy still controlled the sea. After Jutland, Germany rarely risked its fleet again. The blockade tightened. Allied logistics remained secure. Britain's global sea lane stayed open. German morale in the Navy collapsed. Mutinies erupted in 1918. In the end, tactics win battles. Strategy wins wars. What the battle revealed about Britain. Jutland exposed British weaknesses that had been ignored for decades. 1. Complacency in design. The Admiralty believed British ships were the best in the world. They were not. 2. Flawed doctrine. Timetables and expectations built on Trafalgar-style decisiveness were outdated. 3. Cultural arrogance. Officers assumed victory was inevitable. 4. Disconnected command. Rivalries between Jellicoe and Beatty damaged trust. 5. Propaganda naivety. Germany won the information war within 24 hours. Jutland forced Britain to confront all of these issues. Without that reckoning, the Royal Navy might not have been ready for World War II. What the battle revealed about Germany. The high seas fleet was brilliantly engineered, superbly trained, disciplined, resilient, tactically lethal. But Jutland revealed their fatal limitation. They could not break the blockade. They could not dominate the sea. They could not change the war. Germany's navy could win battles, but not win the war at sea. And after Jutland, they knew it. The battle that broke the German Navy's spirit. The German public celebrated Jutland. The Kaiser hailed it as a victory. But the sailors of the high seas fleet knew the truth. They had fought bravely. They had performed brilliantly. They had survived the greatest naval battle of their lives, only to return to port and sit idle for 2 more years. The slow death of morale began. By 1918, crews refused orders. Mutinies broke out in Kiel. Sailors raised red flags on their masts. Germany surrendered not long after. It was not Jutland itself that broke them, but the pointlessness revealed by Jutland. They had risked everything, endured hell, proved their worth, and nothing changed. In that disillusionment, an empire collapsed. The battle that saved the Royal Navy quietly. Jutland's most important legacy for Britain was not victory. It was transformation. After the battle, armor schemes were redesigned. Cordite handling was revolutionized. Flash protection was enforced. Turret safety improved. Radio communication modernized. Leadership training overhauled. Gunnery systems upgraded. Damage control training intensified. When World War II began, these reforms saved countless lives. In a tragic way, the loss of Invincible, Queen Mary, Defense, Black Prince became the foundation of a safer, smarter, more adaptable Royal Navy. War teaches brutally, but war also forces progress. The global impact. Why Jutland shaped the 20th century. The United States learned from Jutland. U.S. Navy officers studied the battle obsessively. Their conclusions shaped the Iowa-class battleships, the use of carrier task forces, radar-directed gunnery, damage control doctrine. Japan learned from Jutland. Yamamoto studied British and German mistakes. His carrier strike doctrine, used at Pearl Harbor, was influenced by Jutland's visibility issues. Soviet naval doctrine emerged from its lessons. The Soviets focused on submarines and coastal defense, believing large fleets were vulnerable. The era of the battleship ended. Carriers took over. Submarines became decisive. Electronic warfare emerged. And it all began with Jutland. The human legacy, memories that never died. Jutland claimed 6,094 British lives, 2,551 German lives, nearly 9,000 men. Most were under 25. Many were teenagers. Behind every statistic is a human story. A letter never delivered. A photograph left in a pocket. A promise never kept. A future never lived. Their sacrifice is the foundation of Jutland's legacy. Not the tactics, not the ships, not the politics, but the people. Why Jutland matters today. Jutland is not just history. It is a warning, a reminder, a message across time. It teaches humility. No navy is invincible. It teaches adaptability. Technology will always change faster than doctrine. It teaches accountability. Failures ignored are failures repeated. It teaches humanity. War is not steel versus steel. It is people versus fate. And it teaches this above all. Victory is rarely clear. Defeat is rarely total. But the truth, buried beneath waves, logs, and memories, always remains. Today, the wrecks of Jutland lie silent, dark, untouched except by currents and drifting sand. They are war graves. They are time capsules. They are the final witnesses of a battle that refused to fit neatly into textbooks. Every year, ships from Britain and Germany visit the site. Sailors toss wreaths. Engines fall silent. The sea grows still. And in that silence, Jutland speaks, not in triumph, not in shame, but in truth. The truth of courage. The truth of failure. The truth of learning. The truth of change. The truth of human lives bound to steel and storm. The Battle of Jutland is forgotten by many, but it should not be, because in that fog-covered sea, on that chaotic day, the world's understanding of naval warfare shifted forever, and the echoes of that shift continue even now. In every carrier that sails, in every submarine that patrols, in every radar pulse that scans the waves, the children of Jutland still shape the oceans today, and the sea remembers.